This story happened in Hunan, China. In 1972, a construction team was preparing to build a hospital, and an excavator accidentally dug up an ancient tomb, a tomb from over 2,000 years ago. This was a square tomb, 20 meters deep, in the shape of a funnel. A 4x 1.5 meter coffin was placed at the bottom of the funnel. Everyone was shocked by this unbelievably giant coffin. It was made of dozens of pieces of wood, some boards weigh more than 1,000 pounds. As soon as the coffin was opened, countless items came into view. Even though there was no gold, silver or pearl, there was lacquerware, which was plasticware for the time. Oddly enough, lacquerware was a Japanese invention made from the sap of a murashi tree that was incredibly durable, almost like our plastics today. Back then, lacquerware was more precious than gold. Each item was exquisite and looked brand new. One of the items caught the eye of a staff member as he opened it. It was lotus soup and looked still fresh. This was incredible. Each piece was perfectly preserved. How could that be? They were from over 2,000 years ago. After all the items were removed, the staff tried to open the coffin in the center where the owner of the tomb was located. It was covered by a T-shaped silk banner. The banner, called the name banner, was written with the name of the deceased replaced with a portrait. We know the name because the tomb's original inventory is still intact. The beautifully painted tapestry depicting the earth and heaven with Chinese mythological Charak. RS. There was also a silk painting showing a variety of exercises that researchers have called the founder of Tai Chi. The banners depicted an abstract of the cosmos and the afterlife at the time of the Western Han Dynasty. On the painted silk garment, the horizontal section of the T represents heaven. The vertical section represents the underworld. The top of the vertical section of the T represents earth. In heaven we can see Chinese deities, as well as Taoist symbols such as cranes, representing immortal ID. Between heaven and earth, we can see heavenly messengers sent to bring the owner to heaven. Underneath this is the owner's family, offering sacrifices to help them on their journey to heaven. Beneath them is the underworld, two giant sea serpents intertwined.
The body was covered with 2 layers of beautiful quilts. They looked brand new. We were all shocked, because the guy I mentioned earlier, he specialized in silk. He's never seen such a good silk from 2,000 years ago. He was so happy, but when he tried to pick it up, he couldn't because the silk looked good but already got too old and felt like tofu.
Finally, the owner of the tomb was revealed. The body was in a mummified state, and what made it even more amazing was her body was so well preserved that researchers were able to perform an autopsy. This resulted in being able to conclude that the mummy actually died of a heart attack.
I was the fearless young man. I wasn't thinking about all the important people in the room. My thought was that I'd volunteered to do this autopsy and now I couldn't fail, so I just focused my mind on figuring out how this woman died.
She had her ligaments that still bend, her hair was intact, her skin was soft to the touch much like a living person, and her veins still housed type A blood. She is widely recognized as the best preserved human mummy in history. Specifically, her diet was too rich in sugars and meats, and she suffered from arterial coronary problems and an array of additional ailments including gallstones, high cholesterol, high blood pressure, and liver disease. Buried with her were skeletons of various food animals, jujubes, lotus soup, grains, and a complete meal including soup, rice and meat skewers on a lacquer set. Pathologists even found 138 undigested honeydew melon seeds in her stomach and intestines. As such seeds typically take 1 hour to digest, it was safe to assume that the melon was her last meal, eaten minutes before the heart attack that killed her. So how was this mummy so well preserved? Researchers credit the airtight and elaborate tomb in which Lady Di was buried. Resting nearly 40 feet underground, Xinjui was placed inside the smallest of 4 pine box coffins, each resting within the one larger. Think of Matryoshka, only once you reach the smallest doll, you're met with the dead body of an ancient Chinese mummy. She was wrapped in 20 layers of silk fabric, and her body was found in 21 gallons of an unknown liquid that was tested to be slightly acidic and containing traces of magnesium. A thick layer of paste-like soil lined the floor, and the entire thing was packed with moisture-absorbing charcoal and sealed with clay, keeping both oxygen and decay-causing bacteria out of her eternal chamber. The top was then sealed with an additional 3 feet of clay, preventing water from penetrating the structure. While we know all of this about Xinjui's burial and death, we know comparatively little about her life. Lady Di was the wife of a high-ranking Han official Li Kang, the Marquis of Dai, and she died at the young age of 50, as a result of her penchant for excess. The cardiac arrest that killed her was believed to have been brought on by a lifetime of obesity, lack of exercise, and an opulent and overindulgent diet. Nevertheless, her body remains perhaps the best preserved corpse in history. Xinjui is now housed in the Hunan Provincial Museum and is the main candidate for their research and corpse preservation.